Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our review of the USMNT's 1-0 win over Saudi Arabia in Austin, Texas. Yes, Chris Richards was the hero of this one, converting Seb Berhalter's free kick just after the hour, giving the US safe passage to the Gold Cup quarterfinals. Here we go. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, returning hero Taylor Rocco. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. It's me, the man who, when I showed up to recording, said, wait, did I need to be here? Realizing that we were all here. But I'm happy to be here, once again, talking about the U.S. winning a game in emphatic fashion. I'm not sure it was emphatic, but I'm going to say that anyway. Why not?
Wonderful stuff, Taylor. Good to have you back. Also joining us, a man who didn't have to give an awkward answer to Taylor's question you just posted there, is Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. No, I didn't. How are you? Still frozen. I see. They still haven't cranked that internet down on your castaway island. Taylor's really putting you to shame here.
Yeah.
He is joining us with full, 21st century electricity, which you have yet to discover.
That sounds fun. Full disclosure for the listener who's not watching on YouTube, I think I've established this before on the feed. In the United Kingdom, the internet is either operated by Crank or someone like on a bicycle, or is it a gerbil?
Where am
It's a
I?
gerbil on a wheel, I think.
I couldn't be in the United Kingdom. No, not at all.
I don't know. You've got some sort of black magic going on up there,
Yeah.
Graham. I can't figure it out.
That explains it.
Nowhere here has good internet. Joe Larry, though, has good internet. How are you, Joe?
I'm great. I'm just happy the word crank has gotten a lot of play this week. Like, more than I think in any previous week of the Total Soccer Show's existence. Team Crank. Here we go.
Team Crank. One of Jason Statham's finest, I
Yeah.
think you'll find.
I'm more of a high voltage kind of guy, but yeah, either way.
Very
No?
good.
Crank 2, just for me? All right.
I think so, yeah.
Colon cruise control? Have I mixed up my sequels there? Not sure. Maybe I did. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you're going to get our bonus content, by the way. Bonus episodes, bonus video, and access to our Discord server. We're talking USMNT. We're talking all things Club World Cup and much, much more on the Discord server. Join us there if you'd like to do so and to support the show. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. And as a reminder, if you'd like to check us out on YouTube, go subscribe to us there. Link in the show notes. Graham is voguing right now to demonstrate the moving pictures we are capable of. 75% of us are capable of, anyway, on this particular episode. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show one more time. All right, let's get to the Gold Cup action, shall we? The US with the 1-0 win over Saudi Arabia, just to reiterate there. Poch sticking with the same lineup that produced the 5-0 win over Trinidad and Tobago on Sunday. The first time he's made no changes since taking charge. So, Taylor, we had a weakened Saudi team here, missing some Al Hilal players. I think 4 of their best players were missing for this one. We did get Renard in his crisp white shirt on the sidelines. That was a pleasure to see, as always. I think if I was going to sort of top line this one, Taylor, not quite as strong a performance against Trinidad and Tobago, but against much stronger opposition, and maybe not a classic of the genre.
No, I agree with Graham's befuddled chuckle there. Yeah, it was not a classic by any stretch. Watching this on delay, having wrangled 2 children in the sun all day, the eyes were feeling very heavy for large stretches of this game. And I think that's the way Saudi Arabia wanted this game to go. They were okay with not having much of the ball. They were okay with disrupting the U.S. at times in the way they were trying to build out and have possession. And I think they did a pretty good job of that in the first half. I think the U.S. didn't really help themselves in that first half either. But Saudi Arabia made this a challenging game, and that's what they want to do. It's their plan for how they are going to get to the World Cup. This is a Saudi team that are third in Group C qualifying out of Asia right now. I think in 10 games they have 7 goals for 8 against. They are not scoring a ton. They're not conceding a ton either. And so they make your life really difficult. And so in that way, at halftime, I thought this was going to be 0-0. We kind of know the way this game's going to play out. And then Chris Richards finds a way to turn into prime Ronaldo and scores an in-step semi-volley off of a free kick, and the U.S. gets the win. So in that way, it's a successful result against a team that will very likely be at the 2026 World Cup. And we've seen opposition like this before for the U.S. at the World Cup that's going to defend, that's going to make life difficult. And so, again, in that way, it's a positive. Still a lot of work to be done.
Yes, indeed. Joe, how are your feelings after this one? Are you feeling more bullish about the programme?
Nope. I feel exactly how I did before this started. I think that's kind of been the theme of the summer for me, is really the needle not being moved, because that's what we're waiting for, right? This summer is really not about making the Gold Cup quarterfinals, although that's cool and a good goal. It's not about really winning the Gold Cup, although that's cool and that's a good goal. It's about which players can perform well enough that they make their case to be a part of the full U.S. men's national team roster whenever it assembles next, right? And we assume that's probably going to be in September with a lot of the first choice guys coming back who are unavailable this summer for various reasons. And in this game, I didn't really see anybody jump out and say, hey, it's me. Like, hey, I should be a part of that roster. And there have been some good moments for various guys this summer. I think we've been pretty clear about the guys that we are more interested in watching. The Matt Freeses, and we'll talk more about Matt Freese, I would imagine, later on. The Alex Freemans, the Diego Lunas, Malik Tillmans, Jack McGlynn's. Like that sort of group of players, I think, is the five-man group that I'm really curious to see. And I don't think any of those dudes had a particularly notable outing in this game, so I don't really think my feelings on anything USMNT have changed greatly.
Yeah, they got the job done. That's one of maybe the only positive I can claim out of this game. It became pretty clear early on, to Taylor's point, that the US, the way that Saudi Arabia, I mean, they wanted basically no part in this match as a possession team, and so they made it clear that the US was going to have to play through them, going to have to break them down. And the US struggled to do that, and it became clear in the second half that they weren't really going to be able to find answers to that. So it became, find a way to win this match, find another way to win this match, and they did that through a set piece. So I give them moderate credit for that.
Moderate credit. Did you feel it was more marginal, Graham, than it needed to be, the victory?
I mean, I certainly had hoped that the US would reach a higher level in this match. It wasn't a classic, to Taylor's point. I will not be buying the DVD as I was watching this at 4 a.m. and it was still goalless. I did wonder why I was watching this at 4 a.m. my time.
Likewise.
But,
poor man. I'm so sorry. I'm
I mean,
so sorry we've done this to you, Graham. I really
know.
am.
I've been radicalised by this podcast. But to answer your question, Ryan, yes, I had hoped for a better performance, but the US has qualified. They'll face tougher tests, hopefully against teams that will open up more against them, which will suit their game. And hopefully the US can reach a higher level, as they did against Trinidad. I know there's the caveat of Trinidad were really, really bad in that match. But I still felt like there was more energy, there was more intensity, and Saudi Arabia did make this game difficult for the US, but yeah, they had to grind it out.
Yeah. Taylor, I think definitely a second half was better, certainly as a spectacle, than the first half. What do we think about Poch's game management and how the flow of this game went?
I agree with the overall sentiment. I would say it's like I am presently at the beach. It would be like if your first 2 days at the beach were like constant thunderstorms and monsoon rain, and then the third day it was just cloudy. Like, it's like, yeah, that's better, I guess. It's not really, still not
Tops
really
off.
what we're hoping for, but you know, comparatively speaking, it was better. I'm good with it. I mean, because it is still, like, as you said, Saudi missing 4 key players, the U.S. missing a significant number more than that, and I think still with this group trying to find a way to execute Poch's system the way he would like. We saw that at the hydration break where he was having apparently emphatic words with his attacking core about what he was expecting from them and what they weren't able to do in this game, and then we see the changes at halftime. And I think it made sense, some of them. At the same time, I think I end up going back to Joe's point of like, yeah, okay, but it doesn't really change much for me because it wasn't as though we saw massive adjustments that completely overwhelmed Saudi Arabia. It was still a set-piece goal taken from Chris Richards, marginally onside. I was really nervous that was coming back. And outside of that, there's a few opportunities. There's the Ajamang header, I think, to close out the first half. That's a nice opportunity, but nothing comes of it. It wasn't as though the U.S. then were like comprehensively better, comprehensively dominant. And if anything, it felt like after Richards gets that goal, they were sort of content with a 1-0 win, content to see it out, kind of recognizing that Saudi Arabia didn't have the attacking firepower to probably find a way through as long as the U.S. didn't give them obvious opportunities. So again, in that way, they didn't make life difficult for themselves, the United States. They didn't give up cheap opportunities over and over again. They had some good possession. They had some threatening possession and some good moments where they were able to open up a very defensive Saudi team. But I wouldn't say that I came away from this feeling like we've got a next level, we've got difference makers, we've got impact subs off the bench. I still kind of think this is a work in progress in a game that felt a bit like a friendly at times. Certainly not helped by the atmosphere or lack thereof in Austin.
Yeah, 100%. The 11,000 or so people in attendance at this game at Q2, which can fit double that. Yeah, not ideal on that front. We've alluded to the changes that Pochettino made. I want to run through those changes, but before we can do that, I think we need to run through the lineup, so I'm going to do that as well. Matt Freese started in goal in this game. I'll just do my Matt Freese bit now because he didn't do a lot in this match. he is Pochettino's number one. It sure seems like, because Matt Turner, Poch's previous number one for certain stretches, and the U.S.'s previous number one, is in camp and on the bench for these games. So Matt Freese, it certainly seems like it is his job to lose at the moment until something shakes and moves to the other goalkeepers in this pool, and that will happen for Matt Turner, but it's a question of how much that's going to matter when he transfers this summer. It was Matt Freese in goal. Defensively, it was Alex Freeman at right back, Chris Richards and Tim Ream in the middle, Arfsten on the left. Again, same lineup as the last game that Ryan alluded to. So you had Seb Berhalter, De La Torre in midfield, you had Jack McGlynn on the right, you had Diego Luna and Malik Tillman as the sort of more attacking midfielder, half-spacey players, and then you had Pat Ajiman up top as the number 9. And the way the U.S. set up in possession in this game, which was the phase that mattered most because they had almost all of the ball in this match, the way they set up in possession was in the back three. Like, it was exactly the same look as we saw against Turkey. It was exactly the same look that we saw against Trinidad and Tobago, where it was this lineup of players, effectively. You had Freeman as the third center back, along with Ream and Richards. So that's your back three in possession. Then you had the double pivot of the two midfielders, De La Torre and Berhalter. Then you had your front five, where Max Arfsten got high and wide on the left like he does for Columbus. Jack McGlynn went high and wide on the right, which I called a really interesting and fascinating sort of deployment for him the other day. He's playing wide right, which is something he's never done before in his career. Then you've got Luna and Tillman as the half-space guys, like I alluded to earlier. And then Pat Ajiman up top as the 9. So you're in that 3-2-5 structure that we see all the time. The problem for the U.S. in the first half, and there were a few of them, was that they were not creating chances out of that structure. They had a ton of the ball. Saudi Arabia were defending, to my eye, when they were higher up the field in a 4-3-3. Then they would drop back into a 4-5-1. The U.S. never took advantage of the man advantage that they should have had in midfield. It should have been the 4 for the U.S., the double pivot and the 2 half-space guys, against the 3 for Saudi Arabia. And they just almost never seemed to move the ball quickly enough or to have the appetite to break lines to find Diego Luna or Malik Tillman outside of Saudi Arabia's number 6. And Pochettino kind of talked about that after the game, referencing how the U.S. was trying to take advantage of the space in the pockets outside of that deepest midfielder for Saudi Arabia. And I don't think he was pleased with how the U.S. did that. That's one problem in this game. And I'm willing to put some of that on the players because I think those problems were solvable and they didn't really get solved in the first half. There were other issues, though. Like, the U.S. ran their entire attack through Max Arfsten in the first half.
Yeah.
And he was bad. Like, this, I think we're pretty much done with Max Arfsten for now. I think it was that brief spell in the Turkey game, Graham, that you and I were interested in, and then that sort of faded away. But Max Arfsten in this game had 88 touches of the ball. That was more than any other attacking player. I'm thinking about in that band of 5, right? Ajiman, Tillman, Luna, McGlynn. That was more than any other attacking player by 35 touches in this game. The next on the list is Jack McGlynn. It was a huge gap, and Jack McGlynn played in center midfield for a chunk of the second half. So much of the attack ran through Arfsten, which meant that McGlynn was doing nothing because he didn't offer anything as a 1v1 threat when the ball would get his way because he never touched the ball, or not often enough in the first half. And so everything was so unbalanced for the U.S. I thought they were stagnant moving the ball and moving themselves off the ball. And so finally you get to halftime and Poch shuffles the deck a little bit. It's the same shape, but he moves Berhalter back into Freeman's role at center back. Freeman moves high and wide on the right side. McGlynn then moves deeper into midfield to where Seb Berhalter was in the first half. And you do start to get a little bit of better play. You could see Jack McGlynn's quality on the ball that De La Torre and Berhalter just don't have, that smooth ball progression ability with his passing. You can see some of that stuff. I like Freeman much better as a high and wide option than I do as a stay-at-home center back. And I do think if the second half hadn't been so choppy, where there's all the injuries and stoppages in the first 15 minutes, there's subs. There's a ton of stuff going on. And then right after the subs, in the 62nd minute, you get the goal from Richards in the 63rd, and that changes the game. So I do think the second half was better. I was just a bit frustrated because I think both the performances were poor in the first half, and I don't really know that Poch is setting this team up in an ideal sense with those players in the positions I mentioned and with Arfsten carrying such a heavy burden in this team's attack.
I do think some of that Arfsten tilt that you talk about, Joe, was by design by Saudi Arabia, where they were crowding the pitch to keep the ball away from McGlynn and Tillman. I presume they watched the Trinidad and Tobago game and saw just how many entry balls were coming from those two players, and we really saw none of that in this game. And you look at the numbers at the end of the first half, Arfsten and Ream were the two players with the most touches. It just felt like over and over again the US possession play was getting bogged down in that area where they were never able to consistently activate dangerous areas. And one of the few times that Arfsten was able to stride into space and get forward in that first half was right towards the end of the half where he fizzes a low ball across goal, and when he does that, there's no one gambling and on that moment. Maybe because he hadn't done it in the whole match until that time. And you look at, I'm just looking at the numbers from the first half here. The US had 400. This is from Opta. The US had 424 touches in the first half. 9 of them were in the opposition box, which says a lot about just how ineffective they were at having any kind of attacking presence in that first half. And things improved slightly in the second half with those changes that Joe ran through, with Berhalter dropping into like right centre back, moving Freeman a little bit higher, seemed to get Tillman and Luna a slightly more separation away from their men, that they were able to get into slightly more space. But I mean, it was marginal gains. I didn't feel like the US were hugely more creative in the second half either.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's try and draw some more positives from this performance. Talk about much more going forward in the Gold Cup as well. Won't you join us then? Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our review of the USMNT's Gold Cup win over Saudi Arabia. Joe, I can't help but thinking my perception of the second half being better is because we had a fight. We had a big fight at the end. This ref, the ref did seem to let a lot go, I thought, in this game in general. And also, it was Marco Antonio Ortiz, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the same referee who was banned for 6 months for asking Messi for his jersey less than 6 months ago? I'm not quite sure what's going on.
This is his punishment. He's been banished from the Club World Cup.
You, sir, must live in Arfsten, where the barbecue is expensive, for 6 months.
Oh, boy.
Yes, I think that's what he was destined to do. Yeah, that moment was awesome. Like seeing Bernard go into the fray. So the context here is Tyler Adams is sort of shoved, and then Seb Berhalter, and I love this. Seb Berhalter comes over immediately and is like, no, you're not going to be doing that to Tyler Adams. So here for that. Reminiscent of Luca De La Torre being Pulisic's bodyguard, but like a more intimidating man than Luca De La Torre. Sorry, Luca De La Torre. Coming over to do it. And Seb Berhalter, I really enjoyed that. Then Bernard decides, because it happens like, on the field, but in front of Saudi Arabia's bench. Bernard's like, I'm going to go get involved here. Why not? And then 5 seconds later, and I don't know if this is Poch at full speed or what exactly, why it took him so long. But Poch is like, I'm going to go in too, right? Irv's over there, I'm going to go in too. So then all of a sudden you have this like 8-man scuffle with both managers on the field during the game. It was great. Nothing happened. No, there was no real result of it all. But I honestly cannot think of the last time I saw both coaches pop up on a soccer field in the middle of a game. They always disregard those boxes, but this was another level.
Was Hervé Renard's shirt dirtied in any way after the scuffle?
Impossible.
By the way,
it can't be.
It can't be. Yeah, it's like Teflon. By the way, I was so uncomfortable watching him in that heat wearing that shirt. I can't imagine how uncomfortable he was.
Living on the edge.
I mean, it probably ain't his first rodeo with those kind of temperatures.
In Saudi Arabia, that's a fair point,
Yeah, indeed. Graham, we mentioned Seb Berhalter there, of course. I thought a big improvement from the TNT game from him. Ed, you want to talk about him or any other performances you want to highlight?
Yeah, Berhalter that had the most touches of any of the midfielders that lined up for this game. I thought he was the most involved in that area of the pitch. I'm sure his numbers were bumped up a bit by him dropping into the back line for the second half, but nonetheless he had 14 passes into the final third. So for comparison, Jack McGlynn only had 8, Luca De La Torre only had 3. So whenever the US was able to break lines, I think the only player that was ahead of him for that was Tim Ream, who was actually relatively effective at playing those line-breaking passes. We know he can do that, but it was stark when there was so little else happening for the US. But Berhalter was frequently involved. I thought he made... It probably was a step up from his performance against Trinidad, but I kind of made the point after that game that I was a little bit warmer on his performance on that game than maybe some others were. So... yeah, it feels like he's getting more comfortable in this team with every game, to the point that if Tyler Adams is going to come back into this midfield, which you would assume is going to happen at some point over the course of this run, it might be for Luca De La Torre, which after the 2 friendly matches I wouldn't have predicted. I would have said De La Torre was the more important of the 2, but Berhalter's stock seems to be on the rise.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree with that, Graham. I think the ability for Sebastian Berhalter to serve a ball into the box is a differentiator for him, and I think if there's something that's going to get him on the World Cup roster, that's what it's going to be. I think Poch likes Berhalter. I am still not as warm on him, I think, as you are. But the Berhalter performance in this game, I thought was fine. Maybe even good. Like I think he was solid for the most part for the U.S. and that is totally fine with me. The notable thing I think of that midfield group at the moment, because we have settled on, it seems like Pochettino has settled on a lineup for this tournament. We've seen the same lineup in back-to-back games. It's basically the lineup that we saw in the Turkey game. The difference, though, from the Turkey game is the base of midfield, where Johnny Cardoso has not started a game so far in this Gold Cup. I didn't know why that was, so I asked Sanjay Sujanta-Kumar, who's covering the U.S. in person, and he's been sick. So I don't know if listeners knew that. I don't know how well this has been communicated. Maybe I just missed it. But Cardoso does come off the bench and play some in this game. We know that Tyler Adams has had that foot injury. He comes off the bench in the second half, plays his first minutes of this Gold Cup. Cardoso comes off the bench, plays his first minutes of this Gold Cup, but he wasn't even in the squad, Johnny Cardoso, for that game against Trinidad and Tobago. So I was curious what was going on there. That's what it is. So I am also curious as a result then to see how the midfield shakes up when those two guys are like fit and 100% ready to go. I don't know how Poch is going to make those decisions.
Yeah. Joe, reading the tea leaves on your analysis a little bit, I'm noticing a sort of pattern on the sort of the left side of this team. Arfsten, De La Torre, maybe even Tillman we can bring into that as well. Are you feeling that flank is not quite up to scratch at this point? Or have I just drawn a conclusion there?
I think I think you're right. I think for me a lot of that was Max Arfsten, who just wasn't effective in this game in the attack. I think so many wasted opportunities died at his feet effectively. So many misplayed passes, like passes to the wrong foot. I think there's a pass towards the end of the first half where he's just looking to play the ball back to Seb Berhalter and just totally misplays it, like plays it to the wrong foot. Berhalter gets blitzed and the U.S. lose the ball. Arfsten was, from minute one of this game where he's got that sloppy touch and build up and the ball turns over, this was just not his game. And it's troubling because I can sort of see the logic as someone who's watched a lot of Max Arfsten for the Crew. I can see the logic of him being the go-to guy for Pochettino in some of these group stage games where I know the Scuff folks have been very critical of Arfsten playing minutes, and I don't blame them for that. I think there's a belief that Tolkien would be better at doing the attacking stuff than Arfsten by some folks, maybe not the Scuff folks out there, but by some folks out there. I don't know that I agree with that. I think Arfsten is and can be a bigger attacking weapon than Tolkien, and when you have basically zero defending to do in these games, I can understand why he's on the field. He was not a better attacking player than John Tolkien would have been in this game. And so I think that it's starting to wear on the case that I've been making for Arfsten getting some of these minutes, or at least for understanding where Pochettino is coming from, because he was ineffective in this game. Graham mentioned that really sort of one dangerous moment where he plays the ball into the box towards the end of the first half. Other than that, it's him not winning 1v1s, like going and trying to attack 1v1 and failing, or misplaying passes, or not even going and trying to attack 1v1. And when he had so much of the ball pushed his way, I was disappointed with how ineffective he was in this game. And I am between that decision and between the Arfsten over Tolkien decision, and Freeman constantly being asked to play as a third center back, and McGlynn being asked to play a position that he's never played before, and Harriel playing as a right back against Switzerland, and all of these things. I am still wondering exactly how much Tate Poch is grinding, and like how committed he is to his bit. Because even though we saw changes in the second half of this game, I think it was pretty clear that there were going to be challenges when you see the lineup and you see where these players have been used. I don't think some of these guys are really being optimized.
Agreed entirely, especially on the Freeman point, Joe. Because if it were the case that Dest just weren't going to play for the U.S., or were going to play an entirely different position, and so Joe Scally were going to be that right back, then I could see it, because you want a right back who's going to do something similar to what your first choice option is going to do. But presuming that when we have our full strength 11, it's Dest on the right side, Jedi on the left, there's no way you're asking Serginho Dest to stay back in a back three and be a defensive kind of stalwart and facilitator. He's going to get forward. He's going to be attacking. And that was where I think we both had such enthusiasm for Freeman. Certainly your enthusiasm was greater than mine. I will never, ever try to claim that I was as hyped about Freeman as you were, Joe. But had a lot of hype for him, a lot of enthusiasm, with the expectation that, like, okay, with him and maybe John Tolkien starting, maybe it's Arfsten, we have fullbacks who want to get forward, want to play high, want to move inside, want to create. And instead, we haven't really seen that. And so I share that concern of you're asking Freeman to do something that doesn't really bring about his strengths, but also isn't bringing out the strengths of the person who's ahead of him in the depth chart. So I end up scratching my head there. And so that halftime adjustment makes sense, but it's also sort of a situation that was created by the lineup and by the selection that you then remedied, albeit by not really making that many personnel changes, just kind of moving people around.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's just neutralized so much of what Freeman brings. And I understand that there are not a ton of attacking options that you feel great about. And even Freeman moving higher and wider like we saw for, 20 minutes in the second half is not a cure-all for the U.S.'s attacking play in this game. But it does make me feel like something's being left on the table. Yeah. Can I do one other tactical thing that I think was kind of left on the table in this game? And that's that the U.S. never really seemed to attack the Man City zones in this match. And Charlie Boehm had a Blue Sky post about this after the game that attaches the U.S. pass map, which that pass map illustrates the 9 touches in the box that Graham referenced earlier on in the show. The U.S. had so much of the ball in this game, but they were so static in moving off the ball. Like, there were so few runners moving and attacking the half spaces, right? In those Man City zones, those corridors on the outer channels of the box that you see Pep Guardiola teams and all the good possession teams really go and attack. They send runners into those spaces. I can picture Kevin De Bruyne doing it for Man City. They send De Bruyne into that space, and he cuts the ball back. And the U.S. has other attacking players, and I've heaped a lot of blame on Max Arfsten for this game. I think it's deserved. But Arfsten wasn't exactly helped out by the fact that it seemed so static on that left side. And McGlynn, in his few touches on the right, like Malik Tillman, who played on the right side of attacking midfield in this game, was like never making that run into the half space to get on the ball. And I was a bit disappointed by how slowly it seemed like the U.S. solved some of these problems. And I bring that up just to say I'm a bit frustrated by some of the Pochettino player deployments, but it's certainly not all on him. Like, I think there were some solvable problems in this game, and the U.S. players just didn't quite get there quick enough.
And Joe, to double down on that one with like the static nature of the U.S.'s attacking play, the chance that you all have mentioned, the Arfsten ball in, that like sort of almost comes to something, but we don't have numbers in the box. That is basically because Tim Ream shapes like he's going to play the ball like towards the center or maybe out to the right, and Saudi Arabia were doing a good job of shifting numbers to block the middle, but also make sure that they had numbers to limit some of the more dangerous U.S. attackers. And then Ream just plays it back where the ball came to Arfsten, who is wide open at that point and has the opportunity to drive into the box and play that cross. But even there, that was like the one moment where there was sort of a risky pass from a center back, but it was like not trying to like damn with faint praise, like, but it was a kind of an obvious ball. It wasn't as though Saudi like made it difficult and Tim Ream threaded the needle and Arfsten was alive to it. More often, he was sort of, oh, that pass came to me, I should be running. It wasn't an automatic run in behind. There wasn't that sort of automatic movement from the United States. It felt like, oh, Luca De La Torre is clearly shaping to play this ball. I guess I should run. Like that level of delay, and then there would be a run. And I think, so even those moments that did sort of come off, they still came off because of what the defensive players were doing, the opposition was doing, less so than the U.S. creating things from open play with some creativity and skill.
And that was one of the things that I felt Damien Downs offered when he came off the bench.
Agreed.
Was his movement and his runs. There's one ball that, Taylor, that Ream ball to Arfsten, I think it happened like twice in the whole match, that ball. It's Ream into Arfsten for that chance, and then there's one from Freeman down the right side for Damien Downs not long after he's come on. I can't really remember what comes of it, but nonetheless, the US are into the final thirds, as didn't really happen much else in the match. And throughout this kind of stretch of games, I have been somewhat defensive of Agyemang and kind of said, well, this is the player that he is. I think something that was more in focus in this match was that against a low block, when space is limited, his movement isn't quite up to standard. It really felt like he was an option. He wasn't really getting spun in the way that you would like him to when he was trying to hold up the ball. There wasn't really much coming off him. He had 5 touches in the opposition box in this match. That's his whole contribution in the penalty box. So I don't know where I stand on Agyemang and Downs, because I did think Downs had an impact on the game, but that might have been a game state thing where at that point Saudi Arabia are kind of coming out a little bit more tentatively looking for an equaliser, although they didn't really do much of that either. So it wouldn't surprise me if Poch sticks with Big Pat for the next game. It equally wouldn't surprise me if we saw a little bit more of Downs and more of that movement.
Would either of you put Agyemang into that sort of Arfsten category of like, we know what we're getting out of him at this point, and maybe we've been a little bit more critical of Arfsten. For me, Agyemang, like he has moments. This sounds so mean, and it is, but I'm going to go with it anyway. A friend of mine messaged me to say my brother's description of Agyemang, he looks like he's good, but he's not. And there were so many moments where he makes runs or he tries stuff or he's taking people on, but like twice on the dribble, he just kind of forgets the ball and like takes like too light of a touch and then overruns and has to turn it around. Graham, that Downs ball that you mentioned, I think that is Downs maybe being a little bit slower than I thought he was, and he's not able to get on the end of it. And then there's a loose pass that Agyemang kind of tries to challenge, but he's not really able to get to, and that's where he gets theoretically clattered, but isn't able to kind of ride that challenge to keep possession. And he has flashes, he has moments where you're reminded, like, oh, he can score goals, he can create, he can play, but I think they are few and far between. And so we see the rawness of him, and I think he will continue to develop and be a potentially very good player for the U.S. down the road. I think right now, I sort of have a feeling that if he is the guy leading our line into the World Cup, I've got some concerns, and I think right now it feels like Ricardo Pepi is strengthening his position by his lack of involvement.
It was interesting to see Downs and Ajman on the same pitch together, because when I saw Downs coming on, I think I might have zoned out for a minute or two, and then realised, oh wait, it wasn't Ajman. I just assumed it was going to be like for like, because that's kind of been the way it's been for Poch as USMNT manager. He's really stuck with this 4-2-3-1 and in 4-4-2 at possession. So to see Downs, and I was trying to pinpoint what his role was. He seemed to be playing it off Ajman slightly as more of the runner. But for all intents and purposes, it was two forwards in this team to finish the match. So that in itself was interesting. I'm not sure we got enough evidence to say I want to see it again, or like I desperately want to see it again. But that Pochettino is willing to experiment was interesting as a concept.
Yes, indeed. Let's take one more quick break. When we come back, we'll look at some of our key takeaways from the Gold Cup so far and look forward to that game against Haiti this weekend. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our review of the USMNT's win over Saudi Arabia. We're looking at Mauricio Pochettino's unimpeachable 100% record in the Gold Cup. Taylor, anyone else you want to spotlight or talk about before we sort of get to the general key takeaways? How about Tillman? Have we covered him enough?
Probably not, because he is one of the more interesting players in this roster at present, and maybe in the roster generally speaking, because there is some openness, I think, to the midfield and to the attack, so he could feature in any number of positions if he continues to develop. And I do think that is an if at this point. If he develops, if there are opportunities, then maybe he jumps in. I don't feel like he has nailed down his spot in a prime starting 11 or anything along those lines. But coming out of the Trinidad game, it felt like we saw a new level for him, maybe rising to the necessary expectation given some of the absences. In this game, I think we saw moments in which he is going to try stuff and is going to try to like pick a pass and thread the needle. I believe it's him who's fouled that leads to the free kick that leads to the goal.
Freeman, I think it was on that one, if memory serves.
Thanks for taking away my glory, Joe.
Sorry.
I appreciate that. Of course you have to give credit to Freeman. I should have known. But at the same time, he still has, and forgive me for beating like a dead horse on this one, he just still has those moments where you want that shot to be on frame. You want that pass to be into feet. And it's oftentimes in really important moments where if he's able to find that shot, if he's able to find that pass, it opens up the whole defense or it scores a goal. And he does that with PSV. Sometimes it's a shot from outside the box. You can read more about his goal scoring and his ability in his My Game and My Words piece for The Athletic, which we've promoted on here. It's a really interesting one, and you get a good insight into kind of how he's developed and how he sees the game. But I still feel like we haven't seen him reach that level of comfort where he can just create and play with a little bit of swagger and play with more belief. And so I think we still see him thinking a bit more than playing automatically, which sounds like it would be a good thing. But when you need a person to kind of create and improvise and find fluidity and faster moments, slowing it down to think and pick your moments isn't necessarily what we want. And so I see brighter moments from him. I have seen brighter moments from him in this tournament, but I would really like to see that continue to kick on with more minutes and more starts. Right now, it's thumbs up, but not like massively thumbs up or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for like the convincing Malik Tillman performance against a good team. Like we talked about him against Trinidad and Tobago. I think it's pretty clear that we have to toss all that out, right? Like, I mean, that team was so bad on the day, and it was so bad for the most part anyway. Malik Tillman putting in a good performance in that game means nothing, right? It doesn't mean anything at all. And in this game against like a more competent defensive outfit, he was invisible for so much of this game. The one moment that I really liked of Malik Tillman's, and I do agree, Taylor, that he is still one of the players in this pool that can do something out of the expected, right? Something that you're not ready for. And when the U.S. is on the ball against a compact defense, that's huge. 48th minute, he's got that good idea on the slip ball to Ajman, and it doesn't quite come off. But there's a world in which the timing is a little bit better there between two guys that have played together before, and all of a sudden the U.S. has a nice shot on goal. That is a great moment, and it was one of the few times the U.S. like really got the ball and played it through the last line of defense for Saudi Arabia. There were so many other moments where Tillman was just either not in the game or was in the game and was wildly sloppy on the ball. 5th minute, turnover on the near side. 10th minute, crossover hit for Ajman. 48th minute, I mentioned that good sequence, but the 71st minute, he's got a chance to play Damian Downs into space, and he just like way overhits the ball, and it ends up rolling all the way over to the left side of the field. And Malik Tillman was so sloppy in this game and was not on the ball enough for my liking. I think a lot of that is on him still being quite lackadaisical. And I talked with A Bleacher Report had me sit down with Clint Dempsey the other day for a story, and I sat down with Clint Dempsey and I was asking him about these different U.S. players, and I asked him about Malik Tillman. And he talked about how he's got a little bit of that swagger that you see with PSV that he's brought to the national team. But he also talked about something that we've brought up on this show before, which is that Malik Tillman looks like he's not all the way in the game. And Dempsey sort of, covered his bases by saying, that might just be his style. And there are other players that are like that, right? Darlington Nagbe's the one that always comes to mind for me. You don't have to be Tyler Adams in your running style and like freneticism for you to be a good soccer player. That's not the standard here. But man, it certainly seems like Tillman is easy to fade from a game and is quick to fade from a game. And we are still waiting on him to have that kind of strong performance against a good team. And he talked to Backfield earlier on this summer about how it's now or never. Like, he knows that this is his moment. He comes into this tournament. It's him and Cardoso and Richards and Adams and I guess Ream, if you want to count him in that bunch of like guys that have been around a little bit more. And so the expectations for him are higher. And I'm just not seeing it in games that matter.
Yeah, it was disappointing from Tillman. What I would say is I thought it was equally disappointing from all three of the kind of attacking midfield line, from Jack McGlynn, who we've already kind of covered. We didn't really see him open up those passing angles that we saw against Trinidad and Tobago. We didn't really see him move inside to get a shot from distance away at any point. And then Diego Luna, he probably had the worst game he's had for the US in this stretch since he came into the setup from January camp until now. Just really ineffective, not involved enough in the first half or in the game as a whole. But in the first half, I looked at half time, he'd had 18 touches of the ball. I don't think, I'm just looking at the shot map here, I don't think he had a single shot in the entire game. We didn't even see as much of the kind of little touches and link-up exchanges that sometimes go under the radar in the numbers from Diego Luna. I think they're really valuable. I didn't really see much of that. The second half was marginally better with that change that we've already talked about, with pushing Freeman high, and that got him and Tillman into a little bit more space. But even then, nothing really came off for him or any of those three players.
I will acknowledge my bias here because I really enjoy Diego Luna and what he theoretically brings to the U.S. So I think I am inclined to be more positive on him from the jump. That's what bias is. So I acknowledge everything Graham has said, and I think he is correct. I really enjoy how much like sweeping up Luna is able to do. It's a thing that I've really come to appreciate from him at club level, but certainly with the national team. There are so many moments when he has a ball played into him that is either underhit or overhit or just out in front or even to an opposition player. And he is so good at challenging as soon as there is that possession loss. And he finds a way to just get a toe in, just get a hip in, just get a little bit of a body on the opposition player so that they're going to take a heavy touch or they're just going to boot it out of bounds because they're under pressure. They don't want to make a mistake. But so often when there is a sloppy pass into him or an overhit ball or whatever it might be, he is able to still retain possession, win the ball back, get an opportunity from that one, or just cause chaos. And I think even that spark is so often lacking from this particular U.S. team that I still enjoy what he brings in that way. It is certainly not what I was hoping for from him in terms of like little lifted reverse passes in behind that nobody saw coming. I didn't see nearly enough of that in this game. It makes me wonder if maybe that's something he's been asked not to do because they don't want to risk turning the ball over in the middle of the pitch when numbers are committed. That almost bit them a couple times in this game. Twice, I think, due to Freeman's defensive positioning or lack of strength. Sorry, Joe, to criticize him. But so I like aspects of Luna even when he has a poor game. But I will acknowledge this was not his best game by any stretch.
That was Freeman, Taylor, you criticized there, right? Sorry, I was trying to pull up a stat from this game. Yes, I want to make sure I had that right.
Yeah. I think it was the 20th minute. It's the one where there's like the long ball that he doesn't win, then he kind of doesn't body, and then they end up transitioning into attack quickly. Am I about to be yelled at by Joe? I'm scared.
No. You don't need to defend yourself. I'm here to say that Alex Freeman has not been what I expected him to be this summer. And I think first and foremost, that's because Pochettino is playing him in a spot that he's not been playing for Orlando City, which, again, we've talked about. Don't need to go over that again. But in those defensive moments, that's not the first time we've seen Freeman kind of wave around in midfield and kind of whiff on one of those balls over the top. I believe we saw something similar in the Trinidad game, if memory serves. We've seen it once before this summer, certainly. Still got growing to do. And he has not been the immediate upgrade, I think, in that spot that I sort of expected him to be for various reasons. But yeah, it's a great note, Taylor, because I think Freeman was poor in this game, and that that's a game-changing moment, right? I mean, that's a huge moment in a fine margin game. If Chris Richards, who had a very good game, I think for the most part, he's got that misplay back to Matt Freese in the first half, but in general was solid and came up in big moments at both ends, right? Scores the goal off the Seb Berhalter free kick and goes and makes a sliding challenge to bail Alex Freeman out in this moment and to make sure that Matt Freese had a little less to do. Richards was quite good in this game, and I think is going to continue to be the guy for the U.S. at center back for the foreseeable future. But yeah, Freeman, it's a great flag on your part, Taylor, was not very good in this game at all, really.
Yeah, I noted those defensive moments from Freeman as well, and there was a couple of moments where it felt like he misread the bounce of the ball or something. What I would say in his defence was it felt like he was being left in so much open space, pretty much on
the Jack
his
McGlynn
own.
right winger experiment, Graham. That's how it goes.
And Saudi Arabia, while they didn't do a whole lot in an attacking sense, the moments that they did have, pretty much all of them, I think, were from them going quickly from right over to left to Freeman's side, and it just felt like he had like an entire half to defend on his own. So yeah, maybe an elite level defender deals better with those moments, but he was given a lot to do in those defensive moments. So I think that just adds to the point that he's not really being utilised. I don't think we're getting a fair reflection of what he can offer this team right now.
Can I pull back, Taylor? Can I pull back and ask a more macro question about the Gold Cup in general and this whole this whole period? Obviously, the last competitive window before the World Cup. I'm interested in how much this actually informs the World Cup itself, where realistically, more than half the players we're seeing in these teams aren't going to feature. What are we feeling encouraged that this will have an impact on the World Cup, a meaningful one, not just for Poch but for the players?
Yeah, I mean, I am. I think because my goal for this tournament was to see the U.S. have a structure and a style that they can kind of utilize regardless of the personnel that are available. And it's why some of the lineup selections, like Freeman staying back, have been a bit of a conundrum, a bit of a head-scratcher for me. But I still think even with that, there is an opportunity for enough of these players to have a key understanding of how they want to play, of how Pochettino wants them to play in attack and defense and in transition between the two, that you then have tape, you then have film of what they're meant to do, so that when you have the more senior players or perceived senior players coming in, there's an idea of this is how we're playing. Now you jump in and you do the Jack McGlynn role, Tim Weah, you do the Malik Tillman role, Christian Pulisic, but you do it a little bit better because you are a little bit better, and we see the difference accordingly. That's what I've wanted, is organic growth from game to game with logical changes and logical adjustments. And that's where I'm still slightly frustrated by things, because it has felt like there hasn't been that level of growth or that level of organic growth. And so we're still seeing some parts that maybe don't make as much sense to me, that some parts that indicate, as Joe said previously, that maybe Pochettino isn't grinding tape necessarily. But I still think if we see logical progression from game to game, assuming we're going to get a lot of rotation in that final group stage game, and if we don't, then that itself is interesting, because maybe that means you stick with this group, and then once you get to the knockout rounds, you bring back in Adams and Johnny, and maybe Haji Wright if his Achilles allows him to play. I'm not sure where we are on that injury. That's why he wasn't involved in the game against Saudi Arabia. But I still think if you have a coherent and cohesive style, both on and off the ball, then you can bring in your senior team players, get them to kind of play that same style right away because they understand what's being asked of them, and you can build from there. That's my slightly maybe rose-colored look at this team. Along the way, Chris Richards maybe becomes more of a veteran figure and strong leader for them. Maybe Diego Luna continues to develop, even if it was an off game for him. And we see some players kind of cementing their role in and around that squad.
There we go. I think that's very valid. All part of the journey for the group, indeed.
Let's hope.
Graham, Haiti on Sunday in Jerry World in Dallas. I'm sure it's going to be a packed house.
Great Walmart parking lot. By the way, great Walmart parking lot right next to AT&T Stadium. Great for recording podcasts in the middle of summer and almost passing out. I would highly recommend if anybody's.
What do you know about that?
Speaking from experience, Joe?
No, never. That would never be
heard.
Not at all. Nope.
Well, let's hope. You're not going, are you, Joe? You're not going to do it again, are you? No, good.
He's not got a ticket. He's just going to sit outside and record the podcast.
Just like old times.
There's a podcast about that in itself. Car podcasts around the world. I like that. Let's get meta about it. Graham, are you expecting any changes to the lineup? Any reason to believe things will be shaken up for Sunday?
Yeah, there will be changes, I think it's safe to assume. I mean, look, who knows, I guess, but I personally would be surprised if we saw wholesale changes, like 11 new players, just because the last time Poch did that from one game to the next didn't go so well in that Switzerland game. I would be even more surprised if we saw a completely different system, just because Poch has been very consistent at this point, even if he did shake it up a bit with the Downs and Ajman combination, as I said at the latter part of this game. I wonder if we might see John Tolkien given a shot at left back or left wing back, as that position really is in this system. He's the only other, unless I'm forgetting someone, he's the only other natural left back in the squad. And Arfsten has been up and down over the last few games, maybe more down than up at this point. And maybe Tolkien gives you a bit more roominess getting up and down in that position. So I would personally like to see John Tolkien. You'd also have to think that Tyler Adams has a good chance of coming back in if he is fit. And then the other player, when I was looking through guys that have come off the bench, guys that have featured, who might stand a good chance of coming in, is potentially Brendan Aronson. He's come off the bench in both games so far, looked lively in the first game, scored a goal. So maybe a bit of rotation there with possibly Jack McGlynn, maybe to add a little bit of kinetic energy on that right side. And it's good that Haiti, as far as I'm aware, they need a win to progress. So hopefully that will give this game some competitive tension, even if the US have already secured their place.
Joe, wasn't it you who was desperate to see the Aronson brothers get another game together for the U.S.? You
That does
love that
sound like
combo
me.
and wanted more of it?
I can't remember. I know we usually record early in the morning. I might have forgotten, Taylor, but that sounds like something I would say, and actually something I would demand even more than that.
Joe, is it fair to say, even if there are changes, like the spine of this team is pretty solid at the moment? We've got Matt, not Josh Freese, of course, Big Pat at the other end, and then Reeman Richards, Luna through the middle, maybe Berhalter we can include in that spine perhaps as well. It seems like that is like a pretty solid structure at this point. Is that fair?
Solid in that they're the players that are solidly in Pochettino's first choice lineup. Solid in that they're going to be solid against a good team. I'm not so sure about that. I think this is Poch's first choice group. So I would expect actually maybe a little bit more rotation than what Graham maybe is expecting, just because the U.S. already have that spot booked. Yes, you want to finish on top of your group, but a draw probably gets you there. I think we'll see a decent number of changes for that game on Sunday, especially because, I mean, let's not forget, this is a tournament you're playing a lot of games in short order, coming off of, for some of these guys, long seasons as well, or in the middle of seasons. A lot of soccer games on the calendar, regardless of where you're coming from. So it does make me wonder if we will see a little bit more rotation in that game. I don't feel like a lot of those players, Ryan, that you mentioned have like etched themselves into like any sort of further U.S. team. I don't feel good about Pat Ajman starting up top in these games. I don't feel great about Tim Ream starting in games that matter. Or frankly, it's still Chris Richards starting in games that matter. So I'm still very much in wait-and-see mode. I'm eager for the U.S. to be done with the group stage so we can see them in a quarterfinal against a better team and like actually kind of get some more info on this group.
Wow. Who knew Joe was the biggest cynic of the group? I thought it was me.
I thought it was me.
Just me when there's not a whole lot to be gained. That's all.
Oh, gosh. Taylor, any final thoughts for this here episode? Looking forward to Sunday?
No cynicism from me. Looking forward to Sunday and a win and maybe a little bit of rotation. I wouldn't mind seeing Damian Downs get the start up top. I would not mind seeing Brendan Aronson come in there and see if he can maybe look a little bit more solid against a team that isn't set up to destroy the United States. Maybe that will be Haiti, but I do think the U.S. should be feeling pretty confident if it's a rotated squad, and even if it's not, they're pretty much guaranteed right already to top the group. They've advanced to the knockout round at this point, so I think you can play around a little bit, but I would like to see, as I said before, same style, same approach. Maybe you tinker with the personnel, maybe you adjust a bit to the opposition, but I would love to see more individual creativity and more kind of combination plays leading to chances. I want to see a bit more possession leading to shots, if not goals, at the very least. The idea that we're doing something with all of this possession versus, hey, Tim Ream's open again, let me play it backwards 30 yards. It would be fun if we maybe did the opposite of that.
I think the thing that I'd be curious to see from a lineup perspective at some point soon would be to see a lot of these same guys, but a couple of tweaks. I would like to see Haji Wright as that high and wide left player, where he is cutting inside on that right foot like we've seen him do for club and country. I'd like to see Haji over on the left side as the width provider, sort of in the Arfsten role in possession, and then Tolkien as that left back who stays deeper, right? And he becomes a third center back in possession if you need that player. One other problem we didn't talk about from this game is that Saudi Arabia had just a single striker defensive setup, and the U.S. continued to build with three. for the entirety of the game, effectively, and it seemed like maybe that number could have been used elsewhere. I think Landon Donovan pointed that out at halftime. Anyway, that didn't really make a lot of sense to me. But if you see Haji Wright high and wide on the left, you put Arfsten on the bench, you put Tolkien as the left-sided center back. That then allows you to push Freeman high and wide on the right side and to move Jack McGlynn inside. So you don't have to have him as the high and wide player. And all of a sudden, I think you have more progression through the midfield, and maybe you have a little bit more success that way. I would be curious to see that those players in those spots at some point.
Joe, it didn't sound, when Poch was asked about Haji Wright and his injury, it didn't sound great that he's going to be involved in the rest of this tournament. So he said that there will be a statement soon, which, if that's
that was fun while it lasted.
About like,
but it's fine. We can just go to the next winger on the depth chart and just let me just check who that. Right, we've got a problem. Yeah, that is troublesome.
It did.
Maybe a statement performance.
Maybe it's a sponsorship of some kind. Body armor.
You're right, though. It was like very ominous wording about like he will provide a statement about the long-term outlook of Haji Wright's present injury, which I think is an Achilles. It sounds like Achilles tendonitis, which is maybe something that just requires maintenance and time due to overuse. So if not Haji Wright, I think, and Joe nailed it, Graham has nailed it. The one that I had in my notes and then failed to mention, I can't see how John Tolkien wouldn't be an interesting inclusion in that starting 11. I've enjoyed what he's done for the national team in the past. I've certainly enjoyed what he's done at club level, and I think could be just like a scrappy, fun player who certainly, if there is a brawl, is going to wade into that one, but is also going to try stuff and create, and I think would just be a fun experimentation to see if he can bring a bit more electricity to the U.S. attack.
Wonderful stuff. Well, the US 2 wins in the Gold Cup, 6 unanswered goals, and in the catbird seat as established to go ahead. There we go. That is your review of the win over Saudi Arabia. Taylor Rockwell, pleasure to have you back, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure was mine. Good to be back. Lovely to see your faces and also Ryan's blank recording screen.
Yeah, it's better for everybody this way. Trust me. Don't worry about it. Joe Lowry, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. I'm just glad Taylor said that John Tolkien's going to bring electricity and not gravity to the USMNT.
Very nice. Graham Ruthven, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
And listener, thank you the mostest. We'll be back on the feed to review that Haiti game and much more. But for now, bye.
Why would Tolkien bring gravity?